to come out of transformation in a better situation compared to the beginning. The world at the moment, as I just mentioned, faces many of those transformational processes.
Now he's going to give you the blueprint.
Systemic processes, structural changes. I just want to mention three. The first, of course, is the economic transformation. With two main catalytic factors and forces, the energy transformation. Just imagine, in 2050, the world will have the double of its present GDP, even if we grow with only 3% per year. It will have 10 billion of inhabitants, but it still needs energy. And we have at the same time to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement, to decarbonize, to reach zero carbon emissions, or net zero, as it is called. But it's not just this transformation, this energy transformation, which will cost, the estimates are 3 trillion a year. It's not only the only factor being pushing this economic transformation. I think we should not underestimate the big reshaping of global supply chains, which is just happening now.
Okay, so there's so much in that to unpack, okay? So he's talking about ECG, environmental social governance. Now, why am I bringing this up in investment strategies? So BlackRock, Bridgewater, Blackstone, where Larry Fink came from, Saudi Arabia, all these large countries are moving in the whole Bitcoin narrative around it being energy intensive. Guys, branches, ATMs, employees driving back and forth has way more carbon than Bitcoin's mining. It's a narrative, guys. That's why Ethereum moved over from proof of work to proof of stake. You have so many energy efficient, very inefficient cryptocurrency and blockchains. Algorand, XRP, XLM, I could go on and on. The ISO tokens are all, most of them are all eco-friendly, right? It's all the narrative to move us into the environmental social governance, which moves their narrative forward financially, okay? There's some massive countries, Saudi Arabia, China, Russia, Brazil, India, South Africa. All these countries are working to de-dollarize from America, but we'll dive into that in just a moment. So there's a switch of power, just so you guys know. I love being an American, but there's a switch of power that you are going to see within the next 10 years. And if you don't prepare for this, you are going to be completely lost in the system. Okay, so that was Klaus Schwab kicking it off a couple days ago. This was 8 months ago, and this is massive. Two of the wealthiest people in the world. Listen to what they're saying.
And is the role of financial institutions, the sovereign funds themselves, and the major fund managers of the world. I have no better than two better guests than we can have for the next half hour. Let's give them a warm welcome. First, His Excellency, the Governor of the Public Investment Fund, Yasser Al-Rumayyan, joining us from New York, and to his left.
Just to give you clarity, this conference is about the future of ESG, environmental social governance.
Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. We just had some time together in the UAE. One manages $620 billion and is in the top 5 of sovereign wealth funds, and the other sits on top of $10 trillion.
You hear that? $600 billion, top 5, and trillions of dollars.
So what they have to say this afternoon does matter. We have a surround sound studio here, and we have to ask both of them about how they feel about today's level of risk. But the first thing I think we need to do, Your Excellency, is talk about the framework that's been established today. Richard explained it to the audience, but this inclusive ESG framework is important. Why is inclusivity so important to underline with the figures that I was talking about, with so many living without energy and the transition that we need to make now and going to 2050, please.
I think it's important because to start with, it's inclusive. And like what you mentioned, the accessibility to energy around the emerging markets is not in the same level of the rest of the world. So we want to introduce a framework that takes into consideration market realities and also differences to allow representation for all markets, including, of course, the emerging ones. So it will set a new global standard that measures the ESG elements that has inclusivity as its core.
Okay, so you got to think about the block.
So I just wanted to give you guys that was a little bit long, but the reality of what they're talking about is they're going to dictate whether or not companies receive funding based on ESG, which is climate initiatives. Are you hear carbon neutral, that type of thing. They want to stop you from driving your cars. Now, there's been other information to come forward that tells you that it really doesn't matter. What they're doing doesn't really make sense. As far as the electric batteries, things of that nature, you still need fossil fuels to create that stuff. So it's like 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. But you just heard them say this gentleman manages $650 billion. And Larry Fink runs BlackRock, which is a $7 trillion business. I'll play a little bit more of the video in a second, but the guy makes a joke. He's like, Larry Fink is the president of the United States, not Joe Biden. Anybody that controls that kind of money, you don't tell them, they tell you, you see. So it's a strangely odd thing to have these conversations be happening. And, you're fighting about Republican, Democrat. It doesn't exist. These people fund what they deem to be funded, and everybody else falls in line.
Chains that do that. It's all going to be run on blockchain technology. You're not going to be able to use the old archaic banking system to manage the ESG governance, the reporting, the carbon credits, the new
ESG work in Saudi Arabia, and I would imagine there's an information gap because most people don't realize the transition that's underway at the company you're chairman of, is Saudi Aramco, with net zero to 2050, 2060 for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well. But
remember, all oil is traded in US dollars. They're working to go zero carbon.
How does ESG apply to the kingdom in your view, Your Excellency?
We looked into the ESG and the environmental as part of the umbrella, which is the Vision 2030, which sets out the roadmap for the kingdom ESG. We have announced in that the case that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be net zero emission by 2060. That was.
Now, how in the world are you going to be a net zero emission free if they run all the oil, and everybody knows oil doesn't run net zero. So what that means is they want you to stop burning it, but they're going to use it, and then they're going to tax for it. And this thing is just crazy. I want to get forward here and let you hear Larry Fink speak a little bit. All right, here he goes.
It's better to be working with all the companies that are in hydrocarbons, not against them. And I would say in the last 2 years, there has been a remarkable change in attitude.
Listen very closely to the next statement.
Across every energy company around the world, and they understand that they have to be moving forward.
And why do you think that is? Because they're not going to get their funding. They're not going to get their funding. They're choking people off, the financial institutions, or their financial access if they're not moving towards ESG.
And we now have issues around energy security. We do have issues around the need to have reliability of sourcing energy during the transition.